All right, so for your January 2024 box number 39 for It's in the Box subscription, this is what you've got. So it is, you've got your wood pieces for your snowman, and we gave you some white wedges, of course, yellow sponge. You've got a variety of paints and the paintbrush. You've got the stand and some glue. We threw in a couple pieces of baker's twine because there's some options here. So we'll talk about our options when we get to it. But for now, let's get started painting. So we're just gonna take everything out of the box. You got a paintbrush as well for that scarf, and then a variety of paints. All right. So the snowman can either be a winter snowman or it can be a Valentine's Day snowman. If you don't want to do the heart, you can take the heart right off and not use it, and instead we gave you some buttons. And then of course you got your little cardinal. If you don't want to put the buttons on, maybe you just want him to have the cardinal in his hands, you can put the cardinal up in his hands. It won't sit, it's not cut out to sit like the heart, but it certainly is just fine laid on top of his hands, or it can sit down at the bottom on top of the tab that goes into the base, and you can put the buttons in. Now, if you want to paint more Valentine's themed, then you're going to do the red tones for the scarf and the heart. If you want it to be more winter themed, you can use the blue tones for the heart and the scarf. So it's totally up to you on how you want to do this guy. We're gearing up for Valentine's Day, so I'm going to go ahead and paint him red, the red with the red heart and the red cardinal. But again, you have options. We gave you Salty Dog Blue, so that's our darkest blue, like a navy. But you'll be able to change the tint of that with your white paint. Now the same with the heart, we did No Drama, which is our darkest red. But if you want to change this down to a pink or different shades of pink and red in the scarf, or blue and lighter blue or white in the scarf, then you can do that as well. So you have options. All right, so the first thing that we're going to do is we're just going to pull our pieces off to the side. Make sure you have some baby wipes. You'll need your pizza box or a paper plate, and a pair of scissors. And if you have a paint marker, that's fantastic. If you don't have a paint marker, a Sharpie will be great. That will do in a pinch. And if you don't have either of those, then we did give you a paintbrush, which you'll be able to use. And we're talking about using the paint marker on his eyebrows, his eyes, and his mouth. A paint marker will make it easier, but if you don't have one, then you just don't have one. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to paint my snowman, and I'm just going to paint the whole thing white. Once our first coat is dry, we're going to go ahead and put a second coat on as well. I'm using the soft side of my yellow sponge. All right, we're just gonna set that aside and let that first coat dry. While we wait for that first coat to dry, we're gonna start painting our other pieces. So I'm going to paint his arms brown and his nose orange. I'm just gonna use the half wedges for that. Now you can take and put your paint on your paper plate if you want to, or you can just stick your wedge right into the pod. If you want your arms to look more natural, just put a thin coat of brown on them. If you want them to be more opaque, then wait for that to dry and put a second coat. Now I don't have to paint all of this up here because that's actually the scarf and it will be covered. So I'm gonna set those aside and let that dry. And I'm gonna start, I'm gonna put a coat of orange on the nose. Whoops. Just dropped orange into my white. Now we went with our pumpkin picking orange for the nose because we like our snowman noses to be a little bit darker. If you want yours a little bit lighter, you can lighten your paint up with some white paint. And for the scarf, I'm gonna do pink and red. So I'm going to take and I'm going to dump out just a little tiny bit of red onto my plate, just like that. I don't need a whole lot. And I'm going to grab the brush and dip into my white paint a little bit. I'm just gonna pour out just a little. I don't want to taint too much of my white paint there because I still have to put a second coat on my snowman. All right, that's a nice pink, maybe just a little lighter. All right. I'm just gonna use the brush because I already have the brush with the pink on it. And I'm gonna paint the whole scarf this color pink. It'd be a lot easier to put in my red stripes over top of the pink. And now you can follow the instruction sheet as well if you would like to. Of course, I always do the instructions after I do the demo piece. So I never really have instructions when I'm doing the demo. Now we're gonna let that dry. While that's drying, we're going to cut our other wedge in half. We don't need full wedges for this. I'll make sure that you guys just have half wedges. And I'm gonna paint my cardinal. I'm gonna paint my cardinal just red. So I'm gonna dip my sponge right into the pod there. And there's our first coat on that. And then I'm gonna do the same thing with my heart. All right, and then the last thing, I'm going to put a coat of paint on the base. You just need to put a coat on one of the pieces, not both of the pieces. And I'm gonna use the black for that. You can use whatever color you want. I'm just gonna use black. These are gonna be stacked on top of each other, so you only have to paint one. Okay, let's go back to our snowman and get another coat of paint on our snowman. gonna set that guy aside and let him dry. It looks like he might need a third coat, so we'll see in a minute. Let's bring our heart back over. And then let's give our cardinal another coat as well. Let's go back to our arms and give our arms another coat. Remember, you don't have to give your arms a second coat if you don't want to. And then let's do our nose. Now, if you want to do your buttons, now would be the time to do your buttons. I would just paint my buttons black if I were going to do them. Just pounce that on there. And then give your base another coat while you are working with your black. Let's have a look at our scarf. Oh, our scarf actually looks pretty good. I don't think that it needs another coat. Maybe along the edges. All right. You're gonna rinse your brush off. All right, while we wait for all of that to dry, I am going to move over to my bird for a second. Now, I'm just going to take my red wedge that I've been using. I've got a tiny little black spot of black paint on my tablecloth here. I'm going to use that because I don't want very much. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to darken up the sponge a little bit with a darker shade of red. And I'm going to come along the edges of my cardinal and just darken those edges up just a little. I'm just taking my sponge and I'm gently just dragging along the edge of the cardinal. There's very little paint on my sponge, almost next to nothing. I don't want it very pronounced. I just want a fairly light swipe of dark along the edges there, and that's how we do that. We just darken the edges up just a little bit. All right. Now my brush is clean, and I'm gonna take and I'm gonna paint the beak of my bird white, of my cardinal white, just a really thin coat of white. And let that dry. And then I'm going to take and dip my brush into my orange and just mix up a little bit of that orange, just a slightly lighter shade. And then I'm going to come over top of my beak and paint my beak. And there's the beak. I'm going to take the wrong end of my paintbrush and I'm going to dip it into my pot of black paint. I'm going to come over to my cardinal and I'm going to fill in the eye. Just a dot in the center and then swirl out to the edges very slowly and just a little bit at a time till you get it filled. And then just set that guy aside to let him dry. And we'll come back and we'll do a little bit more with him in a minute. I'm gonna move over to my heart and using that same wedge. I do need a little bit more red paint on it. I'm gonna dip it in, just get a little bit wet again. And then I'm gonna grab another tiny little bit of black and just blend that in. And then I'm gonna do the same thing with my heart that I did with the cardinal. I'm gonna come along the edges and just darken those edges up just a little. All the way around. It's very subtle. There you go. You can see just a little bit there. Oh, there we go. I need a little bit more. Okay. All right, we're gonna set that aside. We're gonna bring our brown arms over and our brown wedge, and we're gonna do the same thing with our brown. We're gonna grab a little bit more brown first and dab it off on our table cover or pizza box, dip into the black just a bit, and then darken that brown up. Just keep pouncing until it blends together. And then pounce off that excess paint. You don't want a ton on there. And then the same thing, we're just gonna come along to the edges and just darken those edges up just a little bit. Now remember, if you don't like what you do, grab a baby wipe real quick and you can wipe it off and start over. The worst that's gonna happen is that you'll have to just repaint what you don't like. Okay, set that guy aside. And we're gonna bring our snowman back in front of us. I feel like his head needs to be a little bit like another coat. Okay. All right, so I'm gonna take my black half wedge. I'm gonna make sure there's not a ton of paint in it. I want very little paint. And I'm gonna come along the edges just like we've been doing. And I'm just going to drag just that edge there. Very light drag. It won't matter by the arms. That's the arms are gonna go there. You won't see that. Up around the head just a little. And then back down on this lower part of the body. All right. We're gonna let that dry. Now, if you did the buttons, now's a good time to put a second coat on those buttons. And then we'll do some snow effects to those buttons in just a minute, but let's look at our scarf. So I'm going to use the brush and I'm going to use red, straight red from the pod. And I'm going to paint the stripes. I'm going to paint the narrow stripes. And I'm just going to use my brush straight up and down, okay? Straight up and down. And I'm going to draw or swipe just down the edge of one of those stripes. And then just keep working your way across the stripe till you hit the other side. Just like that. and you'll repeat it. And then once they dry, you may need to do that a second coat on them. So just swipe your brush down the edges, just like that. I'm going a little bit over my lines, the score lines. Not going to worry about it. They don't have to be perfect straight. They don't have to line up to the score line perfectly. Now when you get over to this side of the scarf, you're going to do the same thing, but you're going to have to watch that divide there, okay? It doesn't go all the way across to both ends. Remember, if you make a mistake, you can just grab a baby wipe. Now if you went with the blues on this, you'll be doing the same exact thing, just with the blue shades. All right, and we're gonna let that dry, and then we'll put another coat of stripes on there, or the second coat. While we wait for that to dry, we'll move over to our buttons. If you did the buttons, you're gonna wanna take your original yellow sponge, which you don't want a lot of paint in it, so just dab it off on your table cover or on your pizza box to get most of it out. And then grab the button in your hand, and just one side of it, we're just gonna brush that sponge along the edge to create a little bit of a snowy look on the buttons. And we're going to do that to each one. And then that's it for those. All right, let's bring our bird back over to us. We're going to use the wrong end of our paintbrush, and we're going to dip it into the white paint, and we're just going to put some little accents on the bird. We're going to do a series of 3 dots with the same paintbrush loaded. We're not going to re-dip because we want our dots to come get smaller in size. And so we're going to do that again. And that's all for the bird. Now we're going to do it on the heart. And then we will do... I think that's it. We're not going to do it on anything else. So you can wipe that off. And now you should be able to come back to your scarf and do the second coat of stripes on your scarf. All right, and then we're just gonna set our scarf aside to dry. And then we're gonna clean our paintbrush, and we're gonna clean our paintbrush really good because we are going to use that in a second here. Now, if you have a paint marker or a Sharpie, now is the time for that. And you can take the lid of your white, or you can take your paper plate. And we're going to put a little bit of white on our plate, or you can just, like I said, use the lid and the paint that's already in it. You won't even have to add any more paint to it or anything. But we're gonna water our paint down just a tiny little bit. And we're gonna take our brush. I've got a little too much water on my plate. You just need the tiniest little bit. And you only need a tiny little bit of paint as well. I got way too much. And I'm just watering that paint down just a little bit. I guess I moved. I was gonna do the face and then I did this. So let's do this real quick. All right, I'm gonna bring my cardinal and my heart, my buttons, and my scarf. Now you may not have done the buttons, but I did them. Oops, and I'm actually bringing all of it. I did the buttons just in case somebody elected to do the buttons instead of the heart, okay? So if you don't have them, don't stress it. All right, so I've got my plate of like watered down paint right here. It's really hard to see on that screen. And I've got my paintbrush dipped into it. And then I'm gonna take my paintbrush over top of my stuff and I'm just gonna splatter. I'm just flicking the paintbrush bristles from that watered down paint onto my pieces. Just a little dusting. We're not going for big drops, we're just going for really small splatters. Now, if you have an old paintbrush, you can use an old toothbrush, you can use a toothbrush for that. That works great. You can just pick toothbrushes up at the dollar store and they're great for splatter. And then just rinse them out when you're done and you can reuse them. All right, so that's all I did. Here, you guys want to see what that looks like up close? That's it. Just that little splatter. All right, now we're going to do the snowman face. I'm not sure what happened there. I got distracted. All right. So if you have a paint marker, great. Sharpie, great. Worst comes to worst, you just have to use your paintbrush. You can use the wrong end of it and kind of scratch it in, or you can use the right end and you just have to have very little paint and do your paintbrush straight up and down. Okay, so I'm just gonna take my paint marker or my Sharpie and I'm just going to trace basically the X's that are his mouth. You guys, if you don't have paint markers, you really should invest in a set. Posca is my favorite. This is a Posca number 5. A Posca number 5. I use it the most. I also have a Posca 3 and a Posca 7. All right, next we're gonna do the eyebrows and then the eyes. And the eyes, just try to stay to the inside. Just like that. And then we're gonna start assembling it. Now you might wanna wait for that to dry or steer clear of it while it dries, but tap your glue and then you're gonna glue your two base pieces together. So just run a line of glue around the one that you painted and put the other one on top. So you have this. Now yours will be hollow all the way through. Ours got missed, so our snowman's not gonna sit in our base perfectly. Yours will have 2 cutouts. So just line those up and squeeze them together. Next, we're going to put on our arms. So you should always be applying glue off to the side, not over top of your piece in case you drip some glue. You don't want to drip it on to your beautifully painted project. Line up the arms onto the body of the snowman. They should line up around the outside edges there, and then press down and let that glue adhere. And then the same with the scarf. We're going to put the scarf on next. Just line it up before you put pressure. Remember, pressure activates the super glue. Make sure your hands are clean, unlike mine. Little baby wipe took care of that. All right, now you decide what you want to do next. Do you want to put on your heart or your buttons or your cardinal, or how you want to do it? So if you want to put your buttons on, you're just going to glue your buttons with, make sure the snow is all on the same side. You would just glue your buttons like that. I'm going to do the heart. There's my snowman heart. I'm going to put my snowman nose on. Just make sure that you avoid any wet paint up there. And then I'm going to put my cardinal on. Make sure if you use your cardinal at the bottom that you put him up above that tab line, okay? He needs to go above the tab. All right, there's that guy. And then you just slide the base on. And then you can see what I was talking about, how we needed a double cut. So our snowman sticks up above ours just a little bit, but yours will not. Yours will be double cut and he will slide right down. Now, if you wanted to do the buttons, this is where your little baker's twine would come in. You could string little ribbon or little bows, or you could wrap little bows, whatever you wanted to do. If you wanted to tie little bows and put them on the buttons, I just thought a little bit of baker's twine might dress up a plain snowman with buttons. Not that snowmen are plain. We love snowmen, especially in Michigan, and I know like some of you are out-of-staters, but I hope that you warm states like snowmen as well. I'm not sure your take on that. I'm sure everybody's a little bit different. So this is such a cute little project. I really did love how you could make him wintry, you could make him Valentine-y. You know, you could do a lot of different things with him. So I thought he was a great choice. So I hope you guys enjoyed this. Melissa and I appreciate you guys so much, and we will see you again next month.